We are now in year one of Trump 2.0. Many Americans view this circumstance as a dangerous crisis. We've had other crises in our past, like the Civil War and the Great Depression, which were dealt with in ways that once we got through them, there was some benefit to society, such as the end of slavery with the Civil War and the beginning of a social safety net with the New Deal. This current crisis has seen some examples of fighting against the horror being perpetrated on a daily basis, and one of the goals of this discussion is to analyze the effectiveness of these examples.
Welcome to this latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas. Joining me with their contributions to that analysis are Doug Heinrichs and Marilee Rendulich. Welcome, panel. On November 4th, the Democrats enjoyed electoral victories in the New Jersey and Virginia gubernatorial elections, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the redistricting congressional referendum in California. Congratulations, Marilee, on that one. The Utility Commission in Georgia, the mayoral race in New York City, and many other local and municipal elections across the country during the longest federal government shutdown in American history. The reason the Democrats gave for filibustering the shutdown, the continuing resolution passed by the Republicans in the House, was the stark reality that skyrocketing healthcare insurance premiums will very soon cripple the budgets of millions of American families. The electoral euphoria of November 4th didn't even last a week because 8 Senate Democrats decided to end the filibuster to open the government by voting with the Republicans on a bill that had no solution or even mention of the devastating increases of healthcare premiums, which was the sole talking point of the Democrats during the shutdown. But it did include a provision to allow Republican senators who covertly participated in the January 6th insurrection to coerce DOJ to fork over $500,000 of taxpayer dollars for being investigated about the role their phones played in said insurrection. One final tidbit about the Senate Democratic votes: because the Senate terms last 6 years, none of the 8 voters are standing for re-election next midterm 2026. Given all this background, along with all the history you've observed, how much respect do you have for the structure of the Democratic Party, especially the leadership we see in Congress? Marilee? You had a pretty good electoral result, and it was your Democratic governor that was kind of spearheaded that. So you may have a better viewpoint of how the Democrat Party is working at this point. But overall, how do you see it functioning?
I have to come out saying they're the minority party, and that's unfortunate. But when a president gets both houses, it is a very difficult hill to climb to try to be heard. I hear them, but then I'm receptive to them. The MAGA doesn't hear anything unless it comes from Trump's mouth. So I think they've done fairly well. I think that Trump has given them a lot of things to complain about overall. With respect to what they did on the budget crisis, that was really an untenable situation. And sure, I could have hung in there. I'm on a pension. I get paid. They can't touch it as far as I know. But when I think of how many people have lost their jobs, we're not getting paid, we're forced to go to work. Nobody wanted to fly then, did they? Because the poor, air traffic controllers are being forced to go to work or being penalized if they get sick. there was a lot there. And it's a cruel government that's, running this administration right now. They could have gone on forever. I think they would have gone on forever. So I'm I'm somewhat sympathetic to those 8 senators. I think that they felt the country needed to move forward, that we weren't going to get the traction that we needed. And if we lost, and if they lose their health care, that Republican Party's going down next year, hands down. I don't think in the big picture they felt that they had everything to lose.
No, that vote's supposed to be this week. The vote that the Senate promised those 8 senators that John Thune said that we were going to hold a vote on this on health care premiums. But from what I've been hearing, there's not much hope that they're going to do anything because they don't have a plan. The Republicans
Well,
don't.
the latest plan I heard is that he wants to now create health care funds for people. Again, it's probably checks signed by Trump, that
Yeah,
he gives out to
two grand. How long is $2,000 going to last? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you're
But that's that's a loser
yeah.
in the big picture. I think that's a big loser. And so they got the government running. I think it was a safety factor in the very big picture. And I think it was an important thing to do. I wish we could have hung on longer because I love the good fight, but I'm a little empathetic with where they were coming from.
So you're overall okay with the Democrats, as you see it, doing the best they can, given the cards that they are dealt. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, good. Doug, how do you see it?
I have a real different take, I must say. I think it's one more example of them being an astoundingly ineffectual party. I'm very sympathetic to Nate Silver's analysis of the Democratic Party, and his big theme is that they're so risk adverse. They won't ever put themselves on the line. And I think this is a perfect example. Everything that happened with the shutdown was utterly predictable before it happened. You knew Trump and his people were going to do what they did. So either you don't start a shutdown or you play to win. All they looked like is they wimped out at the end. And I think that is so much how everybody tends to view the Democratic Party that I think it's very destructive. Now, I agree that the Republicans are going to lose a lot in this, but the Democrats are gaining not because of anything the Democrats are doing. It's in spite of themselves. The Republicans are in the process, I hope, of self-destructing, so that the Democrats may by default come out better off, but not because of anything they're doing. I think they're disorganized. I think they're caught up in old-time politics. I think they are tone deaf to what's going on in this country. And I think that the thing they most have to avoid is looking like ineffectual wimps. And they have not figured out how to do that. And I think a lot of the reason Trump got popular in the first place is people were saying, at least he's going to do something. The Democrats promise the moon always. They're very idealistic in their rhetoric, and they never deliver. And they didn't deliver when they were in the majority either very well. So I think they're in trouble, and I think there needs to be a major rethinking of where the party's going. Because they do have a golden opportunity now, because I do think the Republicans have put themselves in a terrible spot. But I think the Democrats have a real risk of blowing it if they don't get their act together.
So based on what you just said, how do you view the results of the November 4th election, where the Democrats pretty much won just about everything that was it? So how do you see that?
I see that as just that there's tremendous growing dissatisfaction with the Republicans and what they're doing, Trump and the Republicans. I think that is starting to happen. And if you look at Trump's popularity ratings, finally they're really starting to go down. And I think people are concerned about their pocketbook. They're concerned about very much bread and butter issues, which I think is the only thing that ultimately matters. And, they're facing higher prices. They're facing health costs that are going to go through the roof, increased unemployment. I mean, they're facing a lot of bad stuff. And I think it's starting to dawn on, you'll probably never get to the real super MAGA people, but they're not in the majority. We don't really need those people. We need all the people in the middle who All the people in the past might have voted for Democrats and voted for Trump. Those are the people we need to bring around. And I think circumstances are bringing them around, but not because the Democrats are doing anything very great. I think it's spite of them.
So they found that they woke up after 11 months of Trump. They kind of saw what he really represents, and
Well, I
that's
think they're beginning to. I think they're beginning to. And I think it's a combination of, I think so much of his rhetoric uh, was about things that the average Republican voter didn't confront on a day-to-day basis. So he could say what he wanted and they believed him. But as you see with his current struggles trying to talk about affordability, you can say prices are better, that inflation's coming down, but everybody goes to the store every day. I mean, even the Trumpites have to go buy groceries. And I think it gets kind of absurd to be arguing that he's conquered inflation when prices are going through the roof. And they see that very concretely.
well, he always lied. I mean,
Yeah, but he was good at lying about things.
he's good at lying about this.
Well, take something like immigration, okay? A high percentage of Trumpite voters probably have never actually dealt with an immigrant, have certainly not had their personal lives directly affected by immigrants. So they buy his line that they're destroying the country and destroying the economy because they don't have any direct evidence. So they believe the guy. But when it comes to things like prices and their jobs, when a major meat processing plant in Nebraska, I think it was, shut down and fired 300 people when it was 3,000 people when it was the main employer in that area. That's right in your face. And I think as those kind of things happen, I think you're going to see peeling support for him. And that's what the numbers are reflecting. His popularity is getting less and less.
But Doug, I mean, I understand where you're coming, your dissatisfaction, but with the Democratic Party. And yeah, Trump's imploding. Thank God.
Thank God. I hope
Everybody is finally
it
coming.
in time. That's my only concern. But yeah.
But I do feel that the Democratic Party has retracted some of its more progressive posturing, particularly with respect to how we refer to other population groups. Some of the things that drove people crazy because it got a little untenable.
Mhm.
Give me an
and I
example
think,
of that, Marilee. Give me an example of some of those things that have become untenable.
well, it's just how you constantly had to refer to different population groups or positioning and how the polite way of referring to these different people.
Are you talking about the trans?
Not just not just
Okay,
trans,
I want to
but
try to understand what you're referring to here about what the Democrat.
well, sadly I brought it up and now I can't think of
You
anything
have
you're
to,
asking
right?
me
You brought
to.
it up. I caught you.
Sort of what the Republicans call wokeness, right? That's what.
Exactly. Yes, thank you. But I feel that they've retracted. They're becoming a little more mainstream, and they're not dwelling on all these factions that I think really, really did unnerve people because you can't keep up with a lot of them.
Yeah.
I also find that maintaining dignity throughout. Okay, my governor is not doing that, and I love every minute of it. But in reality, most people are maintaining their dignity and conducting themselves in a courteous fashion. And I think in the end, people do respect that. And I don't think that, you don't have to vote for the Democratic Party. And the fact that they are, I think, is a reflection that it is a preference. They do have a preference for not just our policies, but our conduct. So it may not be a sterling, dig, and we're not making a lot of ground. And maybe the big fight doesn't appear good enough. But I think that consistent behavior and policy referencing, especially with healthcare, some of these things in climate change have always been mainstays of this party. I think that they're sticking with the big issues. Affordability really does help. So it may not be glamorous or glitzy or all over the news, but I think it helps.
Do you see the Democratic Party in its role as a participant in the electoral process as the major opponent to Trump's march to a dictatorship? Or is there another entity you can name that you feel has more juice than the Democrats, Doug? I mean, you really threw some shit at the Democrats.
I do. Having said that, though,
Yeah.
I do think that they're the only real viable option for a primary opposition to Trump. Who else is there? What else is there? I think there are entities that in the past would have gotten a lot of mileage through the judicial system and taking on a lot of the illegal behavior. With our current courts, you can't count on that working. So I think the only possibility is through the legislative process. And what do we've got? We've got Republicans and Democrats, and they're the only real games in town. So yes, I think the Democrats are the primary one. That's why I'm so distressed when I think they're blowing it, because I
Okay.
think they're the people who have the capacity to actually do something effective.
I take it, Marilee, you agree with Doug that Democrats are the game that we must play.
Yes. And I don't see any other path. I don't. I agree completely with that. But I think some of the can I go on?
Yes, yes.
The strength of the Democratic Party doesn't lie just with Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Schumer. I feel very strongly that some of the bigger players right now are governors. So Josh Shapiro and
Spritzer.
Pritzker.
Yeah.
Love him. I love him very much. And of course, I love my own governor. I think that they're magnificent in bringing forth opposition to all the things that the feds are doing in a very illegal fashion, with these ICE raids and snatching people. Their lawsuits. California has like 60 some lawsuits against the Trump administration, and he's been in office only not even a full year.
Right.
They're fighting on every level that they have to fight on. I'd like to see a lot more governors getting involved. I think that they speak very closely to their own population groups, to their constituents, and I think they're a very relevant and moving base for us.
Very important part of the Democratic opposition are those governors. And I think, Doug, you have a good one too down there in Maryland.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'd like to hear more from him, but he's still busy building a bridge, and he needs those federal dollars.
Trying to get some money to build a bridge from the feds. Yes, that would.
Yeah, that Key Bridge. Yeah, that's tough.
That's
tough.
How do you rank the importance of organizations which produced Hands Off and the No Kings rallies? We have Indivisible, Move On, ACLU, Public Citizens, along with labor unions and many other groups, too numerous to mention, all have coalesced to produce the biggest protests in American history. In addition to the ranking of importance in this current moment, we also want to hear your beliefs on how sustainable this type of resistance is in the long run. Does it have staying power? Now, you both said that the Democratic Party is the main vehicle for the opposition, but these rallies actually have people participation in it, the population. And so that's got to be some significance as far as the resistance as well as the Democratic Party. So how do you rank that in importance, and do you see this continuing? Marilee?
Oh, I certainly hope so. They're very invigorating. I don't know if you participated in No Kings. I did participate in 2 of them.
I did.
And there are people protesting on every level, everything that he does. You see so many different posturings and positionings. I think it's refreshing. I think it's educational. I think the community really wraps behind it. We have so many people going by, honking horns, flashing signs along with all the protesters. So it also had them lying ferociously about us across the country, about violence that didn't exist. So when they're lying, it's making an impact. When they're trying to bring false attention to what's going on to these protests. So I found that all very, very positive. So
Before I go to Doug on this, as far as importance goes, I'm anticipating there's going to be some big organized events right before the primary elections, and the midterms before November. So I'm seeing probably one in the spring before the primaries and one right before the midterms in November. So I agree with you that I just felt so good being with the people and hanging out and talking about, like-minded people who are all pissed off, but just the camaraderie and the good feeling, the relationships, that was great. It was great. All right, Doug, are these protests sustainable, and how do you rank their importance?
Yeah, I think they're actually very important, but I think they're primarily important. It's usually said that it's pointless to preach to the choir, but I think the fact is there's often a very good reason to preach to the choir. I don't think these protests convince one Trumpian to change how they're thinking about things. What I do think they do is keep the rest of us believing there is hope, that we shouldn't give up the fight, that there are a bunch of us out there, that there may be enough of us to really make the difference. So I think that's the primary value. I think the secondary value is that I think they worry Republican politicians who are worried about losing their elections. And I think the biggest thing that's going to encourage Trump's self-destruction is if Republicans start to feel that they have to oppose him sometimes because he's going to take them down.
Do you think that happened, like with the Epstein vote and this new thing there with the killings in the Caribbean?
I think those things are, but I don't think there's going to be any one big issue that just catastrophically takes him down. I think every time something like this happens, a little bit of his support peels off. A little bit, Republicans, I think up to now, Republican politicians have felt they cannot oppose Trump because they're going to lose. Now they may begin to think that if they can't afford not to oppose Trump, or they're going to lose. And I think that if that starts to happen, and there's some hints of that. I mean, you needed Republicans to get the Epstein files, right? I mean, it wasn't Democrats couldn't do that on their own, right? I think you're starting to see those kinds of things. You're starting to see some Republicans be willing to pull away. And that to me is a very encouraging sign.
Very negligible chipping away.
Yeah. But given the margins, it doesn't take much.
Right. While the Senate vote on the continuous resolution to end the shutdown less than a week after the election took place took all the hot air out of the Democrats' victory balloons, Trump signing the bill reopening the government barely got a sniff of coverage because on that same day, recently elected Arizona Congresswoman Adelito Grijalva was finally sworn in only because Speaker Johnson was forced to reconvene the House in order to pass on the Senate's continuing resolution to Trump to sign into law. This allowed Representative Grijalva to take center stage and dominate the news cycle by immediately signing the discharge petition, forcing the House vote to open up all the Epstein files. That same day, finally, good timing, the Democrats on the Oversight Committee released 3 emails they procured from the Epstein estate, which showed knowledge of Trump's hours-long encounter with an Epstein victim back in the day. This Epstein thing is not going away, and while it appears that the disclosure of each new batch shows increases in Trump's involvement, will the issue of the cover-up of this sex trafficking activity be the final straw that takes Trump down? Doug, you already said that you don't think it will, because
I don't think there'll be a final straw, but I do think it's going to peel off some people. I think there are enough of the conspiracy types who have been so obsessed with democratic child abuse, pedophilic behavior in their theories, right? That
Mhm.
seeing it turn the other way may is going to be very hard for them to swallow if anything comes out that really seriously implicates Trump.
So it's possible you believe that he could skate past this as a
Well, I think every time he skates, he loses a little bit of ground, and I think that's the way it's going to go. I don't think there's going to be one big issue that takes him down, but I still think this one's going to make enough of a difference to matter.
So, Marilee, this is a big one here. The Epstein files.
Yeah, this is very hard for me to answer. It really is. Because when you think of the Catholic Church and the pedophilia that has been unearthed from the Catholic Church, and how many Catholics vote for Trump,
Mm.
I have no idea if this is really going to be a factor. People make excuses for this man for everything he's ever done. I just think they're so embedded. I don't know that it's going to be the thing that unlatches them. I was not aware how invested the Republican Party was in revealing the Epstein files.
I wasn't either. Because I don't listen to Fox
And-
News, so it surprised me that they
Yeah.
said that Cash Patel and everybody was all up on this, and the Trump himself, yeah, Epstein files, yeah. I didn't notice that because I wasn't paying attention, I guess.
I think that the same here. I mean, I was aware of it, but I didn't until I really saw that newscast with many of the victims and then both representation from both parties. Did it become clear to me what a big figure? But it should be a factor.
Well, in my
And
mind,
the fact, but it has never been his sexual exploits. I mean, they already talked about him in Miss Teen America, walking in there with the girls in their underwear or less, because he owned the show.
he
This stuff
bragged,
was there
he
before.
bragged to Howard Stern on the radio about that very thing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it was before the first election. I don't know how their minds work. I think that's the bigger issue. They're out there. They're attached to certain figments of his grandeur, and I don't see it. I don't get it. But this is so hideous. This man and what he and his cohort, Ghislaine, have been able to get away with for decades is unfathomable. Does his presidency lay on it? I don't know, but they should all be exposed. It's just this is just unconscionable. I started reading her book. And
Ghislaine wrote a book. Ghislaine Maxwell wrote a book.
Oh, not her book. I wouldn't buy her book.
What book are you talking about then?
I will give you the title of it because I have it right here. Nobody's Girl, and it is by Virginia Roberts.
Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre.
Giuffre. Thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't say her
Okay.
name.
Oh, I did hear about that book.
The young lady who committed suicide in April
Right.
because of all
Right.
all
Yeah.
this. I mean, her life is, I mean, like chapter 3, and it's already horrific.
Yeah.
But so there is no reason on earth why anybody who passed through there shouldn't be exposed, and that goes to Melania too,
Mm-hmm.
because we know she was latched in there, and I think that's one of his bigger objections is her, because I think she shows up in a different path, not as a trafficked victim, but as just one of the
Well, Epstein
indelibles.
introduced her to Trump. From
Right.
Right.
Okay, we're going to move on from that. I think that this thing with Epstein is going to maintain significance as long as the survivors push it. They have to keep pushing it, and their gathering on Capitol Hill was really what brought it up, and that's the only way. Otherwise, people forget 24 hours news cycle is replaced by the next 24-hour news cycle, and it's the survivors got to keep this thing rolling. So I hope that's the case. Please give us your view of the role of the judiciary. Doug, you mentioned a little bit about that earlier. the judiciary playing in those examples of resistance of this descent into dystopia? Now, there's two facets to this question, Doug, is the lower courts and the Supreme Court. And I want to hear your view on both those aspects of the resistance. What do you think about the courts?
Well, the lower courts are a mixed bag because they vary immensely from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and how many Trump appointees are on each one. So, I mean, it varies phenomenally. The problem is anybody who's willing to keep appealing is going to have to deal with the Supreme Court on big issues. And I think their track record is very scary. I think I think there are some limits in what they will go for, but I think those limits are way far from what we would need to keep him from grabbing undue power. I mean, he already has grabbed undue power, and they've allowed that to happen. So,
well, birthright citizenship arguments are this week.
Right.
How do you think that's going to go? I mean, it's right there in the 14th Amendment. It couldn't be written any clearer.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. They are quite capable of revising everything and throwing out precedents, and they've done it on other issues. So I'm hoping that this will be one of the places they draw a line. I wish I could say I'm confident that they will. I don't. I mean, they have shown time and time again the willingness to violate all reason and all precedent to support what he wants done. So I am very concerned. I think that's one of the biggest problems right now is we don't have that. Used to be kind of the ace in the hole to keep anybody from getting too far out of line, and I don't think it's there anymore. Can't count on it.
Marilee, you have a similar view of the courts?
Roberts, Court of Jesters. It's horrible. It's shameful. I have lost all respect. I used to feel he was somewhat balanced, but
Yeah.
in this Trump era, I fear greatly for voter rights. I fear greatly. I mean,
Well,
this
they just gave
gerrymandering,
Texas,
everything they do.
They
the
just gave
shadow
Texas some
docket stuff.
gerrymandering.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
It's just unconscionable. Some of the things that they can justify, and I almost, my heart breaks for the three women on there who always side with the liberal side, because I mean it must be so painful for them every day to go to work and deal with this.
I think it is. I think Sotomayor is ready to cry half the time.
Yeah.
Whenever she writes her dissents. Yeah. One of the goals. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I agree completely with Doug. I have no faith in the Supreme Court. I have much more faith in some of the other federal judicial branches. I mean, I think some of them are coming out with very fair or humane even decisions.
And I think, Doug, to your point you made earlier, there are Trump-appointed judges who are going against Trump.
There are some
in the lower courts. Yeah.
Yes, there are.
So I think the lower courts are doing their job, and the Supreme Court is just a fascist enabling institution that just wants to. There are two things that they do. If it's a Democratic president, they call in the major questions doctrine, which means the agencies are not allowed to do anything. Only the courts can decide. Only the Supreme Court can decide. And if it's a Republican president, it's the unitary executive doctrine, which means he can do anything he wants. And that's kind of like how it's been working lately.
Right.
Yeah. One of the goals for this episode is to tap into your down-to-earth common sense wisdom as responsible citizens to elicit practical advice to our viewers as what they can do to help stop Trump and his cronies from taking us to the hellscape they are creating. There are Democrats heading down to the 2026 midterms. There are the protest events organized by Indivisible et al. There is the ongoing Epstein saga. But beyond the survivors raising their voices, there doesn't seem to be much more opportunity, unless you can come up with it, for regular citizen involvement. So, as a responsible citizen who clearly sees the danger, and I believe you both do, to the future of our society, what do you plan to do, and what do you suggest others with similar mindsets do in ways they can help? I know this is a tough question, Doug.
Sure is.
What
Sure
do you
is.
think? What do you have any plans yourself? And do you have any advice you can give as to what we can do?
Well, I'm not sure I do. I mean, I really do feel fairly helpless, to be honest with you. However, I do think there are a couple of things, and I think one of this taps into to Marlene's point that I think to the extent that we can talk to our Democratic representatives, stressing the importance of them making the shift that Marlene was talking about, away from the woke issues, focusing on bread and butter issues that affect the average American. Those are the issues that give us a chance. And I think that the party, if the party can make that turn, I think that's, you know, that's key because I think Trump is just very beatable. I think the real issue is whether the Democrats can take advantage of it sufficiently. So I think it's probably more important for us to be talking to our Democratic folks. And I think the only other thing on a very, very individual basis, I mean, I think the only chance of, I think to the extent that we know people who are not so diehard MAGA that there's no point talking. But I think there are plenty of people who voted for Trump because he just thought at a practical level he was going to make things better. And I think those people, there's a window for talking to them about that ain't happening because it really isn't. And I think there's enough of those people that can be persuaded, as recent elections have suggested, that I think there is room to get out and talk. And I think we have to be willing as to go out and talk to people that maybe we're not accustomed to going out and talking to. People who are, not in our camp necessarily.
Well, that segues into the next question, but I want to get Mary Lee on the previous question. But before I even go there, I wanted to comment on your point about talking to like our Democratic representatives and tell them, I don't see that there's much of a vehicle for anything coming from the people to them. Even these town halls, which they rarely have too, because what happens is whenever you call them or send them emails or write them letters, all that does is puts you on their mailing list, which they send out an email. Look at all this great stuff I've done. And as far as responding to you personally, they don't really do that. I know my guy doesn't do it because I tried to set up like 5 different times. I tried to get meetings with him. He wouldn't see me, because I'm just an ordinary Joe, nobody significant. So, Mary Lee, you had participated in those rallies. Beyond that, and I agree with you that they were really great events. Do you have anything else that you think can be done?
Yes. Well, I belong to the local area Democratic Club. Some of the things that they've been pushing is a lot of postcard writing. I also belong to a group, I think they're more indivisible run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And every other week, we're down at a coffee shop for 2 hours writing postcards, and they'll churn out 600 to 1,000 postcards. We write for judges and state offices, all across the country. And we handwrite each postcard, address each one by hand. Very personalized. But they are scripted. We can't go off script.
So how effective do you think that
every
is?
postcard we've written for has won those elections. And we're not the only ones writing them, out here in our little California group. This is across the country, these little postcard groups. And they have been very effective.
Postcard groups.
Yes.
So you get together weekly? You're saying you get together weekly? And
the one in Riverside does every other week. Our club does like once a month. Then they're still printing things, and so it's not as personalized. But that's mainly because it's a much larger group and a lot harder to control. So I get that. But I know my sisters back east are doing it. I have one sister that writes from home all the time for Tony, that, it's mostly Tony the Democrat. If you download it, you can get a lot of that information. Phone banking has gotten a lot better. When we were doing Prop 50, we were really only targeting independents and Democrats. So you're phone banking to receptive people, and
Mhm.
you're asking them to vote.
People who may have already voted the way you wanted them to vote. They were already inclined to vote that way, right?
Yeah, well, you're incentivizing them to get out, and not everybody out here knew this was even on the ballot.
Uh-huh.
This was a very special election.
Yeah.
It got a lot of airplay as we got closer to the election, but the actual activities started a little earlier. I mean, it was fast. This came out in September, and we voted November 4th. So there was a huge push, postcard writing, phone banking, and also canvassing. So there's still a lot of that personal touch, and I think it really does make a difference. So people who care, and you can get them involved. We had so many more people coming to the Democratic Club meetings after the first No Kings March. Unbelievable. By the second No Kings March, that many more, no more seats in the room. So these things do matter. People are needing to reach out and to find each other. And so these community activities, I think, really help.
The only comment I have about all that is you go, girl. Yeah, I mean, that's inspiring me. That really is. That, because I kind of feel like I'm trying to be active too, but that what you just described is really encouraging. So good. Do you see any value in confronting MAGA family members and neighbors with arguments that are intelligent and practical about what is happening? Marilee, do you have anybody in your family who is MAGA, or do you have anybody in your neighborhood that you interact with?
Yes. Of my siblings and mom, everybody voted. One brother did vote for Trump, but and that was in 2016. But a month after he took office, he called him an asshole. That may get bleeped. Sorry about
No,
that.
it won't. No. It's a podcast. There's a lot more things.
He's a Republican by nature,
Uh-huh.
So he struggles with some of the issues, but he sees him for what he is.
Uh-huh.
So there aren't any real issues within our family unit. I have never wanted to put out signs because I know I have MAGA neighbors. I know I have anti-MAGA neighbors, but I also have MAGA neighbors. But I live on a little cul-de-sac, and it's almost like personally offensive to them when you put out this home signs. So I tried to avoid the small time controversy, but I did put out my Prop 50 sign. I just decided I'm of age now. It's going in.
You radical.
Some things.
But to my point, do you feel that there's any value in engaging in conversation with anybody in your neighborhood who might be MAGA?
Absolutely not.
Okay. That's what I wondered. Doug, what about you? Is there any point in it?
I think, there's degrees of MAGA-ness, I suppose. And I think the real hardcore people, it's probably a waste of time to try to do that. But I think there are, if you look at the polls on Trump's approval rating and break it down between those who strongly approve and only somewhat approve, his strong approval group isn't that big.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a bunch of people who have been pro-Trump who are open to doubts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key is how that's approached. I think there are a couple of things. I think, first of all, you don't go in talking about threats to democracy, and you don't go talking about moral high ground. You go in talking about inflation, jobs. This is the kind of thing that tends to impact that group of people. And I think the other thing the problem you have with people who have supported Trump and have begun to doubt it is it's very awkward to admit you were a fool. right? So you've got to be very careful in how you present that. And I think I think is Trump has kind of given an opening for that because I think you can say it looks like the longer he's in there, he's really shifting positions. He no longer is doing what he said he's going to do for all of us. That there's been a change, and that you got to recognize that. I mean, you don't have to, even though I think he's been horrible forever, but I don't think you say that to these people because then you're saying, admit you were a fool and see the light. I think you say, look what's happening. Is this man representing the people anymore? He's building gold-plated ballrooms. He's in the White House. He's doing, he's playing royalty. And look at what he's doing on the bread and butter issues that affect the average American. Then I think that it can segue into an argument of if a political leader can change into something you don't like, we really need to make sure we still have a mechanism for putting them out of power.
Mm-hmm.
That we need to make sure that we somehow don't let the system evolve to where we have no say anymore in that. And I think that's one way of backing into the threat to democracy in a way that might be more concretely meaningful than just talking about grand principles of the Constitution. So I think there are some people, I think there is that group of MAGA people who, look at the shift in the number of minority voters who went for Trump this time.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are persuadable, They move this way, they can move that way. And as they see the stuff that's happening, I think, the reveling in cruelty that characterizes this administration, I think starts to bother people. And I think when you realize we're all vulnerable, it's not just those other guys who aren't U.S. citizens that are vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. And I think that is starting to dawn somewhat on this persuadable group. And I think those are the people you target.
I'd like to make one point before I go to the last question about, when you're talking nuts and bolts economics, kitchen table issues, and people would point to the price of gas is actually going down. Well, it is true that gas is going down, but is the reason gas is going down is because Trump's doing anything? It's because the economy is slowing down. People are not driving as much because they don't have as much money to put in their gas tank as they used to before all this came about. But I mean, that's pretty technical description of.
But what you can say, have you saved more on gas than you've lost on groceries?
Yeah.
That's very concrete.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is pretty clear. I don't know about you, but the grocery increase has been much more than my gas decrease has been.
Yeah, I was talking to my son the other day about the price of groceries. I said, because I never look at the money. I get depressed and angry because my wife does all that. But my son said, "Oh yeah, groceries are really, really high."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the kinds of comment. I mean, the comment about your daughter doesn't need 31 dolls.
Yeah, right.
That's a guy who's sitting in gold-plated rooms and spending fortunes. That's really obnoxious.
Yeah.
And I think those are kind of the ways he's self-destructing. And I think and I think that's the kind of thing. So I think you can take all these issues and make them. Yeah, you can't talk abstractly about why the price of gas. I mean, you're right. You're going to lose a lot of people, but a lot of people are going to get that. Hey, look at your grocery bill. Look at your gas bill. Are you better off or worse off?
But the economy is slowing down, and the people are driving less because they don't have enough money to.
Absolutely, that's true. But I don't think that's going to be a terribly persuasive argument.
Yeah, right. All right, look into your crystal ball. Tell us what you see as America on January 20th, 2029. You know what January 20th, 2029 is, right? It's the day that the election results are certified and we have our new Congress. So, Doug, what do you think about that? What do you see America at that point?
Oof. I'll tell you, I think I think it's a real hard call, and I think it's a real hard call because I think you have two opposing forces. I think you have a lot of things that are signaling the collapse of Trumpianism and that version of the Republican Party,
Mhm.
and that's all good. However, the question is that going to happen before they have grabbed so much power that we can't have a fair election? It doesn't matter. I think that's really the issue. Um, at this point, if I had to put money somewhere, I think we're going to be better off. I think we'll probably be able to make it and turn things around. But I don't feel super highly confident about that.
Well, as an election worker, and I've been working probably for about 4 or 5 years now as an election worker, it's locally run. And I cannot see how the feds can get and infiltrate the actual elections just because of the tightness that we have is in order to ensure that everybody who comes in is registered to vote. Then those who aren't registered on our book that we look at, we give provisional ballots, and there's not that many good. I just think the elections that are institutionally, traditionally worked are just so tight that I don't see the feds being able to come in and make any mess. Now,
Well, imagine this scenario. Imagine them saying the election was that there was all this election fraud, challenging it, and that case getting to the Supreme Court.
all right, let me explain to you why I see that that's a very difficult argument to make. Every ballot, this is just in Allegheny County where I'm an election worker. Every ballot is written on paper, okay, and then it is put in the machine, which counts it. You fill in the bubbles like you do on your standardized test, and that ballot goes down to the bottom into the bin. So if there's going to be any challenges made, the challenge has to occur where they count those ballots again. And I don't really see that going to be changing much. Remember what happened in Arizona whenever they had the ninjas out there? But there is that one county was real close, Maricopa County, I guess it was. They didn't get anywhere with that. I just think that there's so much local control that now the gerrymandering is another issue.
That's a big issue, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think California did a lot to help neutralize that.
Right. But you also have the issue of change in voter registration laws and all kinds of stuff to try to cut out segments of voters. So
There's
I think
no doubt that's going to go on. It's just what I think there's just going to be so much. Well, I'm like you. I believe a little bit optimistically that there's going to be enough of us is going to see that. It's going to turn around. I just look at these last elections, these recent elections I cited in the first question.
Yeah.
As a good example. All right, Marilee, what's your crystal ball say?
I don't have it in me to go through this guy until 2029. I have him out in 2026. My crystal ball. He's ineffective. He's muted. We take over Congress and the Senate. We restore some of our democratic values and
so I
medical
should change that
research.
question to 2026 instead of 2029. Right?
I can't bear thinking what damage he can do. I can't. It's just too much for me.
So you think there's going to
look at what he did with the national parks this week?
Yeah, right. He's only been in for 11 months, and look how bad it's gotten.
How do you be such an openly racist president, and get away with this stuff?
You can get in free on his birthday, though. I suppose we should be appreciative.
Yeah. Don't forget that part, right?
That's important, right?
So you don't feel very optimistic then, or are you?
I'm just hoping that we shut him down long before then. I just can't imagine what he could do if he is still has this much control for the next 3 years.
But if the midterms give a Democratic majority in the House and possibly the Senate, but let's just say the House.
Yeah, let's go with the House because the Senate's pretty topsy-turvy.
Yeah, right. So what do you think about that?
I think we have some hope to shut him down somewhat, to mute him somewhat, to bring some civility back. maybe we'll see smaller Venezuelan tankers. Did you hear that? That one? It's the biggest tanker ever seized. Um, I mean, what's happening down in, with our little war in Venezuela, with the snatching of people, this just cannot go on. These are crimes against humanity. And if it's not going to happen within, it has got to happen with our allies. I am looking to our allies, even our Pope, to bring some sanity and civility back, and hopefully tap him down even further and keep him from raging on, which in my opinion is all he's been doing, is just raging against everything and anybody he can poke a stick at.
Well, I think the biggest thing is having Democratic chairs in those House committees, oversight, defense, and going ahead and hold hearings. And another thing,
I think that is very valuable, but we do have to reflect back when Biden was president and how many of them refused to testify. I mean, there is a problem, inherent in Congress as well. But if they can't get control of some of the stuff he's doing right now, these war crimes, I just don't. I can't imagine 2029.
Well, my preference, if I was Hakeem Jeffries, would be to start impeachment proceedings against Hegseth, Noam, Bondi. They impeached Clinton for lying about a blowjob.
Mm-hmm.
They every time that they get in front of Congress, they lie all the time too. You could easily pull those out. They tried to get Comey for lying, which really wasn't a lie. He told the truth. They tried to get him for lying anyway. I mean, that was an indictment. But I think impeachment proceedings against these cabinet officials would be a good way to start. But that's just me.
I'm all in if we win, but we have to win the election to get that triggered.
Yeah,
right. So
right.
We have a lot of work to do next year. We also have a new governor coming in here.
Girl, because you and your California postcard people are just doing it all.
Hey, they're postcarding all across the country.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. All right, Marilee, Doug, thanks so much. This was a great discussion. I'm so glad whenever I get you guys together.
It's fun.
Yeah. And all you out there in Cyberland, thanks for listening. Until next time, stay tuned and we'll be there. Bye now.